Hey guys, tonight we drift into the haunting shadows of ancient Egypt, where the Nile's gentle ripples mask a far darker current. You're standing on its muddy banks, the air heavy with the scent of lotus blossoms and something sharper, raw, primal fear. Torches flicker their flames, casting jagged, restless shapes across the water, and a crowd's low murmur grows as a bound figure is dragged forward through the silt. This isn't a casual riverside walk. You're about to witness the strangest, most unsettling punishments Egypt's ancient justice system ever devised. From whispered tales of crocodile pits to divine curses that linger beyond death, these penalties are equal parts eerie, inventive, and oddly mesmerizing. Fair warning, you probably wouldn't survive this legal system, so don't even think about swiping a pharaoh's favorite sandals. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your city and local time. I'm curious where you're drifting off from tonight. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're still by the Nile, your bare feet sinking into cool, damp silt, the stars above glittering like chips of polished obsidian. The crowd's hush deepens, and you squint to make out the figure now kneeling before a robed official, his silhouette stark against the torchlight. This is no modern courtroom with its neat gavels and paperwork. It's a place where justice feels alive, almost sentient, woven into the very air. Ancient Egyptians didn't play games when it came to maintaining order. Their laws were anchored in Mayat, the cosmic principle of truth, balance, and harmony, which meant crimes weren't just personal slights, they were assaults on the universe itself. Sneak a loaf of bread from a market stall, and you're not just a petty thief. You're tipping the scales toward chaos, inviting the gods' wrath. Mainstream history confirms that by the Old Kingdom around 2600 BCE, Egypt had a sophisticated legal system with local governors, scribes, and even village councils enforcing rules across the land. But here's where it gets deliciously strange. Punishments weren't always about breaking bones or spilling blood. Some were crafted to humiliate others, to erase your name, your legacy, your very soul from existence. Look at the guy kneeling before you, his hands bound with coarse linen, his face pale as the moonlight. He's a merchant caught diluting his beer, a serious offense in a culture where beer was practically a food group, sipped by everyone from laborers to priests. You'd expect a fine, maybe a public apology. Wrong. The official steps forward, clutching a clay tablet inscribed with wedge-shaped marks, and reads a sentence that makes the crowd gasp in unison. The merchant's to be paraded through the village, his head shaved bald as an egg, with a basket of rotting fish tied around his neck like some grotesque necklace. You bite your lip to keep from laughing. Fish perfume isn't exactly the height of ancient couture, but the merchant's trembling, his eyes darting like a trapped animal's. Public humiliation was a fate worse than death in a society obsessed with honor and reputation. Historians still argue whether shaming punishments like this were more common than physical ones, since surviving records tend to focus on high-profile crimes like tomb robbing or treason. For everyday folks like this beer-watering fool, though, the social sting cut deeper than any whip. You shift your stance, the mud squelching softly underfoot, and catch the official gesturing toward the river's dark expanse. Here's a quirky tidbit that'll make you rethink your next swim. Some punishments use the Nile as a stage. Criminals might be sentenced to row a rickety leaking boat for days, dodging hippos and crocodiles, while the village hurled insults from the shore. It's like community service, but with a high chance of becoming lunch. You can almost hear the hippos now, their grunts echoing from the reeds, their eyes glinting like wet pebbles in the torchlight. The merchant's lucky his fishy parade is humiliating. But he's not navigating Hippo Alley. Not yet, anyway. The crowd begins to thin their sandals, slapping the earth as they drift toward the village, and you follow, drawn by curiosity. The scent of warm flatbread wafts from a nearby stall, mingling with the river's damp, earthy musk. A child nearby whispers to his friend about the crocodile place, and your pulse quickens. Crocodiles. As a punishment. You're not sure if it's a tall tale or a grim reality, but the kid's hushed tone and wide eyes suggest it's no bedtime story. You tuck that thought away, vowing to keep your hands far from the water's edge. For now, the merchant's being led off his fish basket, swinging with every step, and you can't help but smirk. Imagine updating your ancient social status experience trader, briefly a walking fish market. As you trail the crowd along the riverbank, the Nile's current seems to murmur secrets of older, stranger punishments. You're starting to grasp why Egypt's justice system felt so otherworldly. It wasn't just about keeping the peace. It was about appeasing gods, restoring Maat, and sometimes just being downright bizarre. You glance back at the river, its surface now a glassy mirror reflecting a crescent moon. Somewhere out there in the depth of Egypt's history are penalties that make rotting fish look like a slap on the wrist. You're about to uncover just how wild this gets. The path ahead curves toward a village square where torchlight dances on weathered limestone walls. You hear a faint chant priest, perhaps, or something older, more primal. The air grows heavier as if it's holding its breath, waiting for the next act of justice to unfold. You're no longer just a bystander. You're woven into this ancient world where breaking the rule could plunge you into a nightmare, cosmic or otherwise. The merchant's silhouette fades into the crowd, but his fate lingers in your mind, a warning of what's to come. You pause by a cluster of date palms, their fronds rustling in the night breeze, and take in the scene. The village feels alive, its pulse tied to the river, the gods, the unbreakable laws of Maat. You notice a woman nearby, her shawl drawn tight, muttering about the ones who vanish. Vanish. Your curiosity spikes again. Were some punishments so strange they left no trace? You're not sure, but the thought sends a shiver down your spine, despite the warm night air. You shake it off, focusing on the path ahead where the crowd's gathering again. Their voices low and tense. Something's happening, a new sentence, a new spectacle. You step closer, the silt soft under your feet, and brace yourself for what's next. This is just the beginning, and already Egypt's justice feels like a labyrinth of the strange and surreal. You're hooked now, aren't you? Ready to dive deeper into this world of divine wrath and fishy fates? Let's hope you don't end up on the wrong side of the law or the wrong side of the Nile. You've left the Nile's muddy banks, behind the memory of that merchant's fishy punishment, still tickling your mind as you weave through a restless crowd toward the village square. The air hums with tension, thick as the scent of baked earth and flickering torches. It's late 11:42 p.m. if you were checking a modern clock. But in this ancient world, time feels different, measured by starlight and the gods' watchful eyes. You're no longer just a curious onlooker. You're immersed in ancient Egypt's pulse, where justice isn't merely law, it's divine personal. And sometimes so strange it sends shivers down your spine. The square looms ahead, its limestone walls glowing faintly, and you sense something big's about to unfold. Tonight you're diving into the chilling decrees of pharaohs, those god kings who ruled with heaven's might, and punished with a creativity that's equal parts awe-inspiring and terrifying. You step closer, sandals crunching on dust, and spot a raised platform at the square's heart. Nothing fancy, just packed earth and rough stone, but it radiates authority. A man stands there flanked by guards in crisp linen kilts, their bronze-tipped spears catching the torchlight like wicked stars. He's a vizier, the pharaoh's right-hand man, his presence heavy with the weight of divine will. The crowd's a mix of hushed awe and nervous glances, their murmurs fading as he raises a hand. Pharaohs weren't just kings. They were gods incarnate, their every word backed by Ra's fire and Osiris's judgment. Mainstream history tells us that by the Middle Kingdom, around 2000 BCE, pharaohs like Senusret III tightened their grip on power, creating a legal system where their decrees were absolute. Crimes against the state, treason, rebellion, or even defacing a royal statue weren't just offenses. They were cosmic insults threatening Mayat, the sacred balance of truth and order. You're close enough now to see the accused, a wiry noble with a shaved head, his hands bound with coarse rope. He's kneeling, eyes fixed on the ground, and you catch a whiff of his fear, sharp like sour sweat. He's been caught skimming taxes from the royal granaries, a bold but stupid move in a land where grain was life. The vizier unfurls a papyrus scroll, his voice cutting through the night like a blade. The punishment. The noble's titles will be stripped, his name erased from every record, and his body given to the desert. You blink, your mind snagging on that phrase. Given to the desert, it's not just banishment, it's a slow, merciless death, where the sun's heat and jackal's teeth do the rest. You imagine the noble's panic, his heart pounding as he pictures endless dunes swallowing him whole. Talk about a career-ending oopsie. Here's a quirky tidbit that makes this even wilder. Some pharaohs, according to fringe tales whispered in dusty taverns, added a supernatural kick to their punishments. A disgraced noble might have their name scratched onto a clay tablet, then shattered in a ritual to curse their soul. Think of it as wiping their afterlife profile from the god's database. You glance at the noble, his face pale as bone, and wonder if he's imagining that fate. Historians still argue whether these curses were mere theatrics or genuinely dreaded, since Egyptians believed your soul needed your name to navigate the afterlife. No name, no eternity, just a lost spirit wandering nowhere. That's not just punishment, it's existential erasure. You shift the dust gritty under your feet and notice the crowds growing edgy, their whispers rising like a swarm of bees. The vizier's guards step forward, dragging the noble toward a cart piled with meager supplies, a water skin, some stale bread, barely enough for a week. You spot his family at the crowd's edge, their faces crumpled in silent grief. It's heavy and you almost feel a pang of sympathy, but then you remember this guy tried to starve the royal stores. Actions meet consequences. The vizier's voice rings out again. May your Ka wander nameless. You wince. That's the ancient equivalent of a divine unfollow, cold final and brutal. The square's alive now, voices clashing as the cart creaks away, kicking up clouds of dust that shimmer in the torchlight. You catch a kid nearby tugging his father's sleeve, asking if the noble's ghost will haunt the desert. You smirk, kid's right. But honestly, you're wondering the same thing. The desert's a beast vast, unforgiving, where mirages twist your mind, and bones bleach white under a relentless sun. You picture the noble stumbling through that wasteland, his fine linen tunic shredding his status as meaningless as a broken reed. Bet he's rethinking that tax dodge, now wishing he'd stuck to honest bookkeeping. You linger, drawn to a stall where a vendor hawks clay amulets, muttering about Pharaoh's wrath. He's not exaggerating. Pharaohs had a talent for making punishments resonate not just in life but beyond, Take Amenhotep II, who once boasted of crushing 7 rebel princes' skulls and displaying their bodies on city walls like grim trophies. Not exactly a warm and fuzzy leadership style. You're glad you're just a visitor here, not a local who might accidentally annoy the God King. Imagine landing on a pharaoh's naughty list. Your next stop's the desert with no Yelp reviews to warn you. You drift toward a group of elders huddled near a fire, their faces etched with age and stories. One recalls a pharaoh, maybe Rameses II, who punished a traitor by forcing him to carve his own confession into a cliff face, then left him there to meditate. Meditate? More like roast. You chuckle, picturing the guy chiseling away sweat dripping, while vultures eye him like a buffet. Egypt's justice had a theatrical streak like a high-stakes drama with no commercial breaks. You lean closer, catching another tale about a rebel forced to carry a stone block across the desert as penance, only to collapse under its weight. Harsh, but you've got to admit it's creative. The fire's warmth brushes your skin and you glance up at the stars sharper and brighter than any modern sky. They feel alive, like the gods are watching, judging every move. It's unsettling knowing every punishment here was meant to appease them, to keep chaos from unraveling the world. You think back to that merchant by the Nile, his fish basket parade almost comical compared to this noble's desert doom. Egypt's punishments are a wild spectrum from absurd to apocalyptic, and you're only just peeling back the layers. A breeze stirs, carrying the scent of dry earth and distant river reeds. You look at the square, now quiet, the platform empty. The noble's gone, his fate sealed, but the air still hums with the weight of divine decrees. You spot a priest in the distance, his leopard skin cloak swaying as he burns incense, its smoke curling toward the sky. Is he praying for Mayat's balance or invoking something darker? You're not sure, but your curiosity is burning brighter than the torches. You step away from the fire, the elders' voices fading, and head toward a narrow street where lanterns glow like fireflies. The night's deep, but Egypt's secrets are deeper, and you're hooked. This world of god kings and cosmic justice feels alive, its rules as unyielding as the desert sun. You're starting to see why their punishments weren't just about crime. They were about eternity, divine order, and keeping the universe from fracturing. Let's hope you don't stumble into any sacred laws as we dive further into this strange, shadowy realm. You're slipping deeper into the heart of ancient Egypt. Now the village squares, torchlit drama fading as you follow a dusty path toward the Nile's edge. The night air's cooler here, heavy with the scent of wet reeds and something faintly metallic like old blood. The stars above are relentless, their light sharp enough to cut, and you feel the weight of unseen eyes, gods, spirits, or maybe just your imagination. The noble's desert doom is still fresh in your mind, his nameless fate, a grim warning. But now you're headed somewhere stranger, where whispers of crocodile pits and reptilian justice haunt the shadows. You're not just wandering, you're chasing the eerie tales of punishments that make fish baskets and desert treks look like a slap on the wrist. The rivers close, its ripples glinting like liquid obsidian, and you hear a low guttural sound, maybe a hippo, maybe something worse. Your pulse quickens, but you're too curious to turn back. You pause by a cluster of papyrus stalks, their tips swaying in the breeze, and spot a group of locals gathered near a crumbling jetty. They're hushed, their faces tense, staring at a patch of river where the water churns unnaturally. A priest stands among them, his linen robe stark white, clutching a staff topped with a bronze crocodile head. You're starting to get it. Crocodiles weren't just animals in Egypt. They were sacred, tied to Sobek, the god of power and protection. Mainstream history confirms that by the New Kingdom around 1500 BCE, Sobek's cult was huge with temples in places like Kam Ambo, breeding live crocs as divine avatars. But here's where the whispers get dark. Some say criminals were thrown to these beasts as punishment, their screams a twisted offering to the god. You glance at the churning water, half expecting to see jaws snap. A man's brought forward, his wrist bound, his eyes wild with terror. He's a thief caught stealing from a Sobek temple, not just a crime, but a middle finger to the gods. The priest raises his staff, chanting in a low, guttural tone that makes your skin prickle. The crowd parts, revealing a wooden cage suspended over the river, its bars slick with algae. You swallow hard. Is this the crocodile pit? The thief's shoved toward the cage, his pleas drowned by the priest's chant. You're not sure if he'll be fed to crocs or just left to dangle, praying the ropes hold. Either way, it's a nightmare. You can't help but think, steal a loaf, get a fish basket. Steal from Sobek, get a one-way river cruise. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some fringe stories claim these crocodile punishments weren't always fatal. A few temples, according to obscure texts, used trained crocs drugged or muzzled to scare criminals into confessing, like an ancient lie detector with teeth. You picture a doped-up crocodile lazily snapping and almost laugh. Imagine the Yelp review scary, but I survived 3 stars. Historians still argue whether crocodile pits were real or exaggerated myths, since hard evidence is scarce. Sobek's priests were secretive, and Nile crocs don't exactly leave court records. But the fear was real, and you feel it now, watching the thief tremble as the cage sways. You step closer, the jetty's planks creaking underfoot, and catch the priest's words. Sobek judges the unworthy. The crowd murmurs approval, but you notice a few look away, their faces pale. This isn't just justice, it's theater, a spectacle to keep Mahat's balance in Sobek's favor. You think back to the noble's desert sentence, how it erased his soul. This feels different, raw, primal, like the river itself is the judge. You glance at the water, its surface now still, but you swear you see a ripple, a glint of scales. Your modern brain screams, nope. But you're rooted, fascinated by this blend of faith and fear. The thief's cage is lowered just inches above the water, and the crowd holds its breath. You hear a splash, then another, and your heart skips. Are those crocs? Or just fish? You're not sticking around to find out. The priest's chant grows louder, and you notice a woman nearby clutching an amulet, muttering prayers. She's probably thinking, what you are, don't tick off Sobek. You smirk, imagining a modern equivalent, like getting sent to a shark tank for jaywalking. Egypt's punishments had a knack for turning nature into a weapon, and the Nile was their favorite enforcer. You back away from the jetty, the crowd's tension clinging to you like damp linen. A kid nearby whispers to his friend, asking if Sobek's crocs ever refuse to eat. You stifle a laugh, trust a kid to overthink a death sentence. But it's a good question. Did priests rig these punishments, or was it all divine chance? You're starting to see why crocodile pits, real or not, were such a potent threat. Fear's a great motivator, and nothing says behave like a toothy god's judgment. You think of that merchant's fishy parade, how it was humiliating but survivable. This thief, he's playing a higher stakes game, one where the river decides his fate. As you move along the riverbank, the chant fades, replaced by the Nile's soft lapping. You pass a fisherman mending nets, his hands steady but his eyes darting to the water. He's probably heard the same whispers. You have stories of criminals vanishing into the river, their bodies never found. You wonder if Sobek's priests kept logs like Tuesday fed 2 thieves to Croc's good turnout. You chuckle, but it's uneasy. Egypt's justice wasn't just about order, it was about power, divine and earthly, flexing its muscles for all to see. The path curves, leading you toward a cluster of mud brick houses, their roofs silvered by moonlight. You're still thinking about the thief, his cage swaying like a grim pendulum. Was it real, or just a show to scare the crowd? You're not sure, but the image sticks as vivid as the noble's desert cart rattling away. Egypt's punishments are a tapestry of the strange, some absurd, some apocalyptic, all tied to the gods. You glance back at the river, its surface a mirror for the stars. Somewhere in its depths, Sobek's waiting his jaws, a silent promise of justice. You pause by a lone palm, its fronds rustling like whispers, and take in the night. The air's alive with possibility, every shadow hiding a story. You're hooked now, aren't you? Ready to dive deeper into this world where gods and rivers judge the guilty. Let's hope you don't catch Sobek's eye as we go. You're moving away from the Nile's eerie ripples, now the chilling image of that thief's cage still swaying in your mind like a grim lullaby. The night's grown quieter, the air thick with the scent of baked clay and distant incense as you weave through narrow streets lined with mud brick homes. Lanterns flicker like fireflies, casting soft shadows that dance on the walls, but there's a tension here, a sense that secrets are buried just beneath the surface. You're no longer just a curious wanderer in ancient Egypt. You're entangled in its pulse, where justice feels like a living thing, divine, relentless, and sometimes so strange it makes your skin crawl. The noble's desert doom and the crocodile pit's primal terror linger, but now you're diving into a hidden world, the scribes. Those quiet record keepers who wielded pens like weapons, documenting punishments with a precision that's both fascinating and unsettling. You spot a low building ahead, its doorway framed by lotus carvings, and hear the faint scratch of reed pens. This is where the real secrets are kept, and you're about to peek inside. You slip closer, the dust soft under your sandals, and pause by the open door. Inside, a scribe hunches over a papyrus scroll, his oil lamp casting a warm glow on his shaved head. He's not just writing, he's etching someone's fate, each stroke of his pen a judgment sealed in ink. Scribes were the backbone of Egypt's bureaucracy, and mainstream history tells us that by the New Kingdom around 1500 BCE, they were elite, trained from childhood to read, write, and enforce the law. They recorded everything, taxes, harvest, trials, making them the unsung architects of justice. But here's the creepy part, their records weren't just paperwork. A scribe's words could curse a soul, erase a name, or bind someone to eternal shame. You watch the man's pen move steady as a heartbeat and wonder whose life he's rewriting tonight. A guard steps into the room, his kilt stained with sweat, and hands the scribe a clay tablet. You lean in, catching a glimpse of wedge-shaped marks, cuneiform maybe, or early hieratic. The guard mutters about a weaver caught selling faulty linen to a temple. Big mistake. Temples were sacred, and cheating them was like spitting in Anubis' face. The scribe nods, dipping his pen in black ink, and begins to write. You're close enough to hear the papyrus crinkle, and you realize this isn't just a report, it's a sentence. The weaver's to have her name struck from the village rolls and her looms burned in a public square. You wince, imagining the woman's shock. Losing your name in Egypt wasn't just embarrassing. It was a spiritual death sentence, cutting you off from the afterlife. You can't help but think, mess with the gods and your legacy's toast. Here's the quirky tidbit that makes this even wilder. Some scribes, according to fringe tales whispered in scribal schools, hid secret codes in their records. A wrongdoer's name might be written with a subtle twist, a reversed glyph. a smudged line that cursed them to wander the afterlife as a lost soul. You glance at the scribe, his face calm but his eyes sharp, and wonder if he's slipping in one of those tricks now. Historians still argue whether these coded curses were real or just myths to scare junior scribes, since papyrus records rarely show obvious tampering. But in a culture obsessed with magic and eternity, you bet those stories kept criminals up at night. You're starting to see why scribes were feared not for swords, but for the quiet power of their pens. You shift the doorway's cool stone, brushing your shoulder, and notice a stack of scrolls in the corner, their edges frayed like ancient secrets. The scribe still writing, his lamp flickering as a moth dances in its flame. You catch a whiff of ink, sharp and earthy, and it hits you. Every punishment you've seen: the merchant's fish basket, the noble's desert exile, the thief's crocodile cage, started here in a room like this with the scribe's steady hand. You picture the weaver, maybe a mother, maybe a widow, waking tomorrow to find her looms gone, her name erased. It's heavy and you almost feel bad, but then you remember she cheated a temple. Choices meet consequences, right? The guard leaves, his sandals slapping the floor, and you linger, drawn to the scribe's quiet intensity. He's not just a bureaucrat, he's a gatekeeper, deciding who's remembered and who's forgotten. You spot a second scribe now, younger, grinding ink with a pestle, his hand stained black. He looks nervous, like he's still learning the weight of his job. You smirk, imagining his first day. Welcome to scribal school, kid. Mess up a glyph, doom a soul. Egypt's justice had a way of turning even paperwork into something cosmic, and scribes were its silent enforcers. You step back, the street's warmth wrapping around you, and hear a distant chant priest, maybe, or a night market winding down. The scribe's lamp still glows, a tiny beacon in the dark, and you're struck by how much power lies in that small room. You think back to the crocodile pit, how its terror felt raw, primal. This is different, cold, calculated like a scalpel carving out a life. You wander toward a nearby stall where a vendor hawks bread and gossip, muttering about a scribe who wrote a man into dust. You chuckle, but it's uneasy. Imagine your name erased your existence, reduced to a smudged line. Bet that weaver's regretting her shady linen deal now. The street's alive with small sounds, crickets' laughter, the clink of clay cups. You pause by a wall carved with Anubis's jackal face, his eyes seeming to follow you. It's creepy knowing every punishment was meant to please gods like him, to keep Mahat's balance. You're starting to get why Egypt's justice felt so personal, so eternal. It wasn't just about crime. It was about the soul, the cosmos, the ink on a scribe's scroll. You glance back at the scribal house, its doorway now dark, and feel a shiver. Those pens didn't just write history, they shaped it one cursed name at a time. You move on the path curving toward a temple silhouette, its columns stark against the starry sky. The weaver's fate lingers as vivid as the noble's desert cart or the thief's swaying cage. Egypt's punishments are a mosaic of the strange, and you're only scratching the surface. Let's hope you don't end up on a scribe's bad side as we dive deeper. You're weaving through the quiet streets of this ancient Egyptian village, now the scribal house's flickering lamp fading behind you like a dying star. The night air's warm, laced with the scent of dust and distant myrrh. But there's a chill in your bones that has nothing to do with the breeze. The weaver's erased name, the thief's crocodile cage, the noble's desert doom, they're all piling up in your mind, each punishment stranger than the last. You're not just a passerby anymore. You're neck deep in ancient Egypt's eerie justice system, where every crime feels like a personal offense to the gods. Now you're headed somewhere darker, where the air grows thick with the weight of sacred crimes. You're about to face the grim fate of tomb robbers, those bold, foolish souls who dared to plunder the dead. The path ahead narrows, leading toward a rocky outcrop where torchlight barely reaches, and you hear whispers of the violated tombs carried on the wind. Your sandals scrape the earth, and you're already wondering if you should have stayed by the Nile. You reach the outcrop, a jagged scar in the landscape, and spot a group of guards clustered around a low cave entrance, their spears glinting like fangs. The vibe's tense like the air before a lightning strike, and you notice a man in chains, his face gaunt, kneeling in the dirt. He's a tomb robber caught red-handed with a stolen amulet, still clutched in his fist. Tomb robbing wasn't just theft in Egypt, it was blasphemy, a direct assault on Mayotte and the gods who guarded the dead. Mainstream history tells us that by the Ramesside period around 1200 BCE, tomb robbing was a rampant problem with even priests and officials, sometimes in on the take. Pharaohs like Ramesses II built elaborate hidden tombs in the Valley of the Kings, but thieves were clever, tunneling through rock to snatch gold, jewels, and even sacred canopic jars. You look at the robber, his eyes darting like a trapped rat's, and feel the crowd's anger radiating like heat. One of the guards steps forward, a grizzled man with a scar across his cheek, and reads from a papyrus scroll. The sentence is brutal. The robbers to be impaled on a wooden stake at the tomb's entrance, left as a warning to others. You flinch your modern sensibilities, screaming, but the crowd nods their faces hard. Impalement was rare but real, reserved for crimes that shook the cosmic order. You picture the robber's final moments, the stake's shadow looming, and can't help but think, dude, was that amulet worth it? You're glad you're just visiting this era, not trying to make a quick buck off a pharaoh's grave. Here's the quirky tidbit that makes this even creepier. Some tomb robbers faced a punishment worse than death. Their bodies were burned, their ashes scattered without burial rites. In Egypt, where mummification was the ticket to eternity, this was spiritual annihilation. Fringe tales claim priests would chant curses over the ashes, ensuring the robber's soul wandered forever, barred from the afterlife. You glance at the chained man, his amulet now in the guard's hand, and wonder if he's heard those stories. Historians still argue whether burning was common or a scare tactic, since few records explicitly mention it. But the fear was potent, and you feel it now watching the guards drag the robber toward a cart piled with wood. Is that for a stake or a fire? You're not sure you want to know. You shift the rocky ground, biting into your sandals, and notice a priest nearby, his leopard skin cloak swaying as he burns incense. His chants are low, almost hypnotic, and you catch words about Anubis's wrath. The crowd's quiet, but their eyes are locked on the robber, some spitting in his direction. This isn't just justice, it's a ritual, a cleansing of the desecration. You think back to the scribe's pen, how it erased a weaver's name. This feels raw or bloodier, like the gods are watching with bared teeth. You spot a woman in the crowd, her shawl drawn tight, muttering about the tomb's curse. You smirk, imagining a modern headline, "Local man regrets grave." Heist cites bad vibes. The guards haul the robber to his feet, and you catch a glimpse of the amulet. A golden scarab, its edges glinting in the torchlight. It's beautiful, but it's also a death sentence. You wonder what drove him to it. Greed, desperation, or just bad friends. The crowd parts, revealing a wooden stake planted in the earth, its tip sharpened to a cruel point. Your stomach twists and you look away, focusing on the stars instead. They're brighter here, unpolluted by city lights, but they feel cold, like they're judging the robber too. You're starting to get why tomb robbing was such a big deal. Graves weren't just vaults. They were portals to eternity, and stealing from them was like robbing a god's house. You step back, the crowd's murmurs rising like a swarm of locusts. A kid nearby tugs his mother's sleeve, asking if the robber's ghost will haunt the tomb. You chuckle, but it's uneasy. Kids always ask the real questions, don't they? You're wondering the same thing. Would Anubis let a thief's soul slip through, or is that stake just the start of his troubles? You think of the crocodile pit, how its terror was primal, tied to the river. This is different, calculated public, a spectacle meant to scare every would-be thief in the village. You glance at the cart, its wood stacked high, and shiver. Fire or stake, this guy's not walking away. As you move away from the outcrop, the priest's chants fade, replaced by the wind's low moan. You pass a man carving amulets, his hands steady, but his eyes darting to the cave. He's probably thinking what you or don't touch the tombs. You imagine the robber's final moments, whether it's the stake's agony or the fire's roar, and can't shake the image of his ashes drifting on the wind, unburied, unmoored. Egypt's justice had a knack for hitting where it hurt most. Not just the body, but the soul. You smirk, picturing a modern equivalent, caught stealing. Say goodbye to your Wi-Fi and afterlife VIP pass. The path widens, leading toward a cluster of houses, their roofs silvered by moonlight. You're still thinking about the robber, his scarab amulet, now a guard's trophy. Was it worth it? Probably not. You think back to the merchant's fishy parade, how it was humiliating but survivable. This is a whole different league where the punishment doesn't end with death. Egypt's justice is a tapestry of the strange, and you're weaving deeper into its threads. You glance at the sky, the stars like a map of the god's will, and feel a shiver. Let's hope you don't stumble into a tomb as we go further. You're slipping further into the shadowed heart of ancient Egypt, now the grim scene at the tomb robber's stake still burning in your mind like a torch in the dark. The air's grown heavier, thick with the scent of dry earth and something sharper, incense maybe, or the lingering weight of sacred rites. The village streets have faded behind you, and you're on a narrow path, winding toward a towering temple, its limestone columns looming like silent sentinels under the star-streaked sky. The robber's fate, the weaver's erased name, the thief's crocodile cage, they're all pieces of a strange puzzle, each punishment weirder and more chilling than the last. You're not just a curious traveler anymore. You're caught in the eerie rhythm of Egypt's justice, where every crime is a crack in Mayat's cosmic balance. Now you're about to step into the world of priests, those enigmatic figures who didn't just serve the gods, they wielded their wrath, cursing blasphemers with penalties that echo beyond the grave. You hear a low chant ahead, rhythmic and haunting, and your pulse quickens. This is about to get seriously creepy. You reach the temple's outer court, its walls carved with jackals and falcons, their eyes seeming to glint in the torchlight. A group of onlookers hovers at the edge, their whispers barely audible over the priest's chants. Inside, a robed figure stands before a stone altar, his leopard skin cloak swaying as he raises a bronze sistrum, its rattle cutting through the night. Priests were Egypt's spiritual enforcers, and mainstream history tells us that by the New Kingdom around 1500 BCE, they held immense power, especially in temples like Amun's at Karnak. They didn't just pray, they upheld Mayat, punishing those who defied the gods, blasphemers, heretics, or anyone dumb enough to disrespect a deity. You spot a woman in chains near the altar, her head bowed, her linen dress torn. She's accused of defiling a shrine, spilling sacred oil meant for Hathor. Big mistake. In Egypt, gods weren't abstract. They were as real as the Nile, and offending them was like inviting cosmic chaos. The head priest steps forward, his voice low but commanding, reciting her crime to the crowd. The punishment, she's to be bound to the god's will, her name cursed in a ritual that bars her soul from the afterlife. You blink trying to wrap your head around it. Cursed like forever. The priest lifts a clay tablet, inscribes her name, and smashes it against the altar, the shards scattering like broken dreams. The crowd gasps, and you feel a chill despite the warm night air. This isn't just justice, it's divine vengeance designed to erase her from eternity. You can't help but think, spill some oil, lose your soul. Talk about an overreaction. You're glad you're just a visitor, not lighting any sacred lamps around here. Here's the quirky tidbit that makes this even wilder. Some priests, according to fringe tales whispered in temple backrooms, used shadow rites to amplify curses. They'd burn a blasphemer's personal item like a lock of hair or a sandal in a secret ceremony, supposedly trapping their soul in a liminal void neither living nor dead. You glance at the woman, her face pale as moonlight, and wonder if she's heard those stories. Is that why she's trembling? Historians still argue whether these shadow rites were real, or just priestly propaganda to keep people in line since surviving texts are vague, mentioning only rituals of binding. But in a culture where magic was as real as stone, you bet those curses felt like a death sentence. You're starting to see why priests were both revered and feared. Their words could reshape your afterlife like a bad Yelp review from Osiris. You shift the courtyard stone cool under your sandals and notice a second priest adding herbs to a brazier, the smoke curling like ghostly fingers. The woman's led to a small chamber off the court, its entrance draped in linen. You can't see inside, but you hear a faint wail quickly muffled. Is she being locked away, or is something weirder happening? You think back to the tomb robber's stake, how its brutality was public raw. This feels different, hidden, mystical, like the gods are handling the punishment themselves. You spot a young boy in the crowd clutching an amulet, his eyes wide. He's probably thinking, "What you are, don't mess with Hathor." You smirk, imagining a modern equivalent, like getting banned from the internet for dissing a celebrity. Egypt's priests knew how to make a point, and their point was eternal. The chants grow louder, the sistrums rattle, piercing the air, and you step closer, drawn to the altar's faint glow. The smashed tablet's shards lie scattered, and you wonder if each piece carries a fragment of the woman's soul. Creepy thought, but you're hooked, aren't you? You notice a guard nearby, his spear resting against a column, muttering about the god's eyes. He's not wrong. The temple feels alive, its walls watching, judging. You think of the scribe's pen, how it erased a weaver's name with cold precision. This is messier, more visceral, like the gods are reaching through the priest to settle a score. You glance at the chamber's draped entrance, half expecting to hear another wail, but it's silent now. Too silent. You wander toward a corner of the court where a vendor sells clay figurines of Anubis, his jackal face eerily lifelike. The vendor's muttering about a priest who cursed a whole family for stealing temple grain. You chuckle, but it's uneasy. Imagine your entire lineage ghosted by the gods. You picture the woman, maybe a mother, maybe a sister, now a spiritual outcast. Was it worth it that spilled oil? Probably not. You think back to the crocodile pit, how its terror was tied to the river's primal power? This is something else, cosmic, eternal, a punishment that doesn't end with death. Egypt's justice had a knack for hitting where it hurt most, and priests were its master architects. The crowds thinning, some slipping into the night, others lingering like they're waiting for a sign. You pause by a carved falcon, its beak sharp as a blade, and take in the temple's grandeur. The stars above feel closer, like they're leaning in to watch. It's unsettling knowing every punishment here was meant to appease gods like Horus, Hathor, Anubis. You're starting to get why Egypt's justice felt so personal, so infinite. It wasn't just about the crime. It was about the soul, the cosmos, the fragile thread holding the universe together. You glance back at the altar, the brazier's smoke still rising, and feel a shiver. Those priests didn't just serve the gods, they channeled them, and you're not sure you'd want to be on their bad side. You step away, the chants fading as you head toward a quieter path, the temple's shadow stretching long behind you. The woman's fate lingers as vivid as the robber's stake or the weaver's burned looms. Egypt's punishments are a wild mosaic, and you're diving deeper into its eerie patterns. Let's hope you don't spill any sacred oil as we go further. You're drifting further into the shadowed veins of ancient Egypt, now the temple's haunting chants still echoing in your ears as you leave its looming columns behind. The night's deep, the air warm and heavy with the scent of dust acacia, and a faint whiff of something sour sweat maybe, or the residue of fear. The cursed woman's shattered tablet, the tomb robber's grim stake, the weaver's erased name, they're stacking up in your mind like stones in a crumbling pyramid. Each punishment stranger and more unsettling than the last. You're no longer just a curious observer. You're woven into the eerie fabric of Egypt's justice, where every misstep feels like a challenge to the gods themselves. Now you're stepping into the world of workers, ordinary laborers, the backbone of Egypt's grandeur, who faced bizarre public shaming rites for their crimes. The path ahead widens into a bustling market square, alive with flickering torches and the hum of voices. But there's a tension here, like the crowd's waiting for a spectacle. You hear a rhythmic clanging metal on wood, and your curiosity pulls you closer. This is about to get weirdly humiliating. You reach the square, its packed earth center ringed by stalls selling bread figs and copper trinkets. A wooden platform stands at the heart, crude but commanding, surrounded by a crowd that's equal parts eager and uneasy. A man's up there, his hands bound, his linen kilt stained with dirt. He's a laborer, one of the thousands who hauled stone for pyramids or dug canals for the Nile's floods. Mainstream history tells us that by the Old Kingdom around 2600 BCE, workers were vital but tightly controlled, living in state-run villages like those near Giza. They weren't slaves. Most were free citizens, but their lives were ruled by quotas and overseers. Mess up and you didn't just lose a day's bread. You faced punishments designed to sting your pride. You squint, noticing the laborer's slumped shoulders. He's been caught shirking his quarry duties, leaving his team short-handed. Bad move in a system where collective effort kept the gods' monuments rising. An overseer steps forward, a burly man with a reed whip tucked in his belt, holding a clay tablet etched with the laborer's crime. The punishment, he's to be paraded through the square, smeared head to toe in donkey dung, with a wooden sign around his neck proclaiming his laziness. You blink, stifling a laugh, Dung. Really? But the crowd's murmurs turn sharp, and the laborer's face burns red, his eyes fixed on the ground. Public shaming was Egypt's go-to for minor crimes, especially among workers where honor mattered as much as wages. You imagine the guy's buddies at the beer stall tomorrow ribbing him mercilessly. Talk about a crappy day at work. You're glad you're just passing through, not hauling limestone under this guy's overseer. Here's the quirky tidbit that makes this even stranger: some shaming rights. According to fringe accounts from village gossip, involved animal branding. A lazy worker might be forced to wear a donkey's tail or a goose feather in their hair, symbolizing stupidity or cowardice for days after their parade. You glance at the laborer now being slathered with dung by a grinning guard and wonder if a tale's next. Historians still argue whether these animal-themed punishments were widespread or just local quirk since worker records focus more on rations than discipline. But in a culture where animals were tied to gods, donkeys to Seth geese to a moon, you bet those symbols hit hard. You're starting to see why shaming was so effective. It didn't just hurt, it made you a laughingstock, a cautionary tale for every laborer in the square. You shift the crowd's heat pressing against you and notice a woman nearby, her basket of bread, balanced on her hip, whispering to a friend about the dung man. You smirk. Gossip travels fast, doesn't it? The overseer's voice booms, ordering the laborer to walk a circuit around the square, and the crowd parts, some jeering, others turning away. You catch a whiff of the dung, ripe, earthy, and way too real, and wrinkle your nose. This isn't just punishment, it's theater, a public lesson in Mayat's demand for duty. You think back to the priest's shattered tablet, how its curse was cosmic eternal. This is earthier, more immediate, but no less humiliating. You spot a kid in the crowd tossing a pebble at the laborer's feet and can't help but chuckle. Kids, right. Always adding insult to injury. The laborer stumbles the sign swinging around his neck, and you notice the crowd's mixed reactions. Some laugh, others mutter prayers like they're warding off his shame. You wonder what drove him to slack off exhaustion, a bad day, or just a hatred for quarry dust. Either way, he's paying for it now, his dignity smeared as thickly as the dung. You think of the tomb robber's stake, how its brutality was a warning to thieves. This is softer but sharper in its own way, cutting at the laborer's place in the community. You glance at a stall selling clay amulets, the vendor muttering about lazy bones. You grin, imagining a modern equivalent, skipped work, wear a trash bag suit on TikTok. Egypt's shaming rites knew how to stick. You step closer to the platform, the clanging sound. Louder now, a guard banging a mallet on a wooden post to keep the crowd's attention. The laborer's halfway through his circuit, his face a mask of misery, and you almost feel bad. Almost. He did ditch his team after all, leaving them to sweat under the sun. You picture the quarry, its air thick with limestone dust, the endless grind of hauling blocks for a pharaoh's eternity. No wonder some guys cut corners, but this? You'd take a lecture over a dung bath any day. You smirk, thinking of that merchant's fishy parade by the Nile. At least fish don't smell like a barnyard. The crowd's energy shifts, some drifting back to their stalls, others lingering like they're hoping for an encore. You pause by a fig tree, its leaves rustling in the breeze, and take in the square's fading chaos. The laborer's nearly done his circuit, ending at the platform where the overseer's waiting with a bucket of water. Mercy, maybe. Or just a way to keep the square from stinking all night. You're not sure, but you're hooked, aren't you? Egypt's justice is a wild ride, cosmic 1 minute. Filthy the next. You think back to the scribe's pen, how it erased a weaver's name with cold precision. This is messier, more human, but no less brutal in its own way. You wander toward a quieter corner where a woman sells warm flatbread, her hands quick, but her eyes on the laborer. She's probably thinking what you are, don't slack off. You imagine the laborer tomorrow scrubbing his skin raw, dodging his neighbor's smirks. Will he go back to the quarry, or is this the end of his stone hauling days? You glance at the stars, their light sharp as obsidian, and feel the god's presence, Mayat demanding order. Seth may be chuckling at the chaos. Egypt's punishments weren't just about crime. They were about community duty, the fragile balance holding this world together. You're diving deeper into its eerie layers, and there's no turning back now. You're gliding deeper into the veiled heart of ancient Egypt now. The market square's rancid memory of the dung-slathered laborer still lingering like a bad aftertaste. The nights settled into a heavy stillness, the air warm and dense with the scent of sun-baked dust, overripe figs and a faint curl of temple incense drifting from some unseen shrine. The stars above blaze sharp, as if the gods are peering down their gaze, pinning you to the earth. The laborer's public humiliation, the priest's shattered curse, the tomb robber's gruesome stake they're stacking in your mind like stones in a crumbling monument, each punishment more peculiar and chilling than the last. You're no longer just a curious drifter. You're entwined in the eerie rhythm of Egypt's justice, where every misdeed is a fracture in Mayat's cosmic harmony. Now you're stepping into a subtler, more mysterious domain, the enigmatic justice of a queen, whose whispered verdicts held a power as haunting as any pharaoh's decree. The path narrows, guiding you toward a grand villa, its walls aglow with torchlight, and you catch hushed murmurs of her judgment. Your sandals scuff the earth, and a prickle of unease tells you this is about to get deeply unsettling. You arrive at the villa's courtyard, a sweep of polished limestone tiles and shimmering lotus pools where a small crowd lingers at a cautious distance. On a raised dais stands a woman, her form regal, cloaked in a pleated linen gown that glows like liquid moonlight. She's a queen, perhaps a figure like Nefertiti or Hatshepsut, though the whispers keep her name unspoken. Her face is serene, but her eyes cut through the torchlit haze like obsidian blades. Queens in Egypt weren't mere ornaments. Mainstream history confirms that by the 18th dynasty around 1500 BCE, royal women wielded significant authority, sometimes serving as regents or co-rulers. They could settle disputes, particularly in matters of court temple or family intrigue, and their rulings carried the weight of divine will. You spot a man kneeling before her, his head bowed, his hands trembling like reeds in a storm. He's a courtier accused of weaving lies about the royal lineage, a reckless move in a world where loyalty was sacred as the Nile itself. The queen lifts a hand, her gold bangles flashing, and speaks in a voice soft, yet unyielding like a breeze that carries a blade. The punishment. The courtier's to be muted, his tongue etched with a ritual scar, and his household exiled to a remote nome. You pause, the words sinking in. A scarred tongue. It's not just physical, it's a symbolic amputation, stripping his voice, his influence, his very place in the court's intricate dance. The crowd's murmurs tighten, a low hum of awe and fear as a priest steps forward, clutching a bronze knife, its edge glinting like a cruel star. You wince, your modern instincts recoiling, but the queen's gaze is steady, unmovable. This is her justice, delicate, deliberate, and cold as the desert night. You can't help but think spreading gossip in ancient Egypt worse than posting your drama on a public subreddit. You're glad you're just passing through, not whispering secrets in this queen's shadowed halls. Here's the quirky tidbit that makes this even spookier. Some queens, according to fringe whispers, traded among palace maids, used veiled hexes in their rulings. A condemned soul might be given a linen cloth stitched with obscure symbols meant to plague their sleep, or tether their spirit to endless misfortune. You glance at the courtier, now being ushered to a side chamber, and wonder if such a cloth awaits him, its threads woven with dread. Historians still debate whether these hexed cloths were real or mere courtly myth, as surviving records rarely mention them, focusing instead on legal decrees. But in a culture where magic pulsed through every ritual you bet, those tales kept courtiers awake, checking their pillows for cursed embroidery. You're starting to grasp why a queen's justice was so feared. Her power was quiet, almost spectral, but it struck deeper than any warrior's spear. You shift the courtyard's tiles cool beneath your sandals and notice a woman in the crowd, her shawl pulled tight, muttering about the queen's stare. She's not wrong. That gaze feels like it could unravel your soul, weighing every hidden thought. The priest returns the knife gone, and the courtiers let out his face, ashen, a linen bandage wrapped around his mouth. You swallow, imagining the scar beneath the permanent mark of his betrayal. This isn't just punishment. It's a spectacle, a reminder of the queen's divine reach. You think back to the laborers' dung-smeared parade, how it was loud, earthy. This is hushed, refined, but no less crushing. It's a wound to the courtier's very essence. You spot a young boy nearby, gripping his father's hand, asking if the man will ever whisper again. You smirk, though it's tinged with unease. Kids always ask the questions adults dodge, don't they? The crowd's subdued, some slipping into the knight's embrace, others hovering like they're waiting for a final gesture. You edge closer to the dais, catching the queen's profile, calm, untouchable, like a statue of Isis come to life. A servant scatters lotus petals at her feet, their fragrance rising sweet and fleeting. And you realize this verdict wasn't just about the courtier. It was about the court itself, the gods, the delicate balance of power. You think of the priest's shattered tablet, how its curse was vast, eternal. This feels intimate, like the queen's rewriting the courtier's life with a single glance. You glance at a nearby pool, its surface mirroring the stars, and wonder if the courtier's dreams will ever escape her shadow. You drift toward a quieter corner where a vendor hawks tiny alabaster vials, muttering about royal vengeance. You chuckle, picturing the courtier's exile, his household scrambling to pack bound for some forgotten outpost where the Nile barely reaches. Was it worth it, those whispered lies? Definitely not. You think back to the tomb robber's stake, how its violence was a public warning. This is subtler, more piercing, but just as devastating. You pause by a carved heron, its beak sharp as a scribe's reed, and take in the villa's elegance. The air hums with secrets, every shadow holding a story. Egypt's justice wasn't just about crime. It was about devotion, divinity, the fragile cord binding the mortal world to the heavens. You're sinking deeper into its haunting depths, and there's no turning back now. You step away, the courtyard's glow, fading as you follow a path toward the villa's outer gates. The queen's verdict lingers, as vivid as the laborer's stinking march or the robber's doomed stake. Egypt's punishments are a strange mosaic, and you're tracing its patterns, each one more unsettling than the last. The stars above feel closer, their light, a map of the god's will, and you shiver despite the warm night. Let's hope you don't whisper the wrong words as we venture further into this cryptic world. You're drifting further into the shadowed pulse of ancient Egypt, the queen's chilling verdict still hanging in your mind like a heavy veil. The night's grown denser, the air warm and thick with the scent of dry sand, wilted lotus, and a faint, unsettling whiff of something acrid, burned herbs perhaps from a distant ritual. The stars above blaze like cold fire, as if the gods are watching every step you take. Their judgment woven into the very air. The courtier's scarred tongue, the laborer's dung-soaked shame, the tomb robber's brutal stake, they're stacking up each punishment, a strange, haunting note in Egypt's eerie symphony of justice. You're no longer just a curious wanderer. You're caught in the rhythm of this ancient world where every crime is a tear in Maat's cosmic fabric. Now you're venturing into a lonelier, more mysterious fate, the horrors of desert banishment, where exile's terrors stretch beyond the body into the soul. The path ahead stretches toward a barren horizon where torchlight fades and the wind carries whispers of the lost ones. Your sandals crunch on gravel and a shiver runs through you. this is about to get desolate. You reach the village's edge where mud brick homes give way to a rocky expanse, the desert's vastness swallowing the horizon like a hungry void. A small crowd gathers near a weathered obelisk, its carvings eroded by time, and you spot a figure standing alone bound in coarse linen, his face gaunt under the moonlight. He's a trader accused of smuggling sacred amulets to foreign merchants, a betrayal of Egypt's gods and its borders. Exile is his punishment, a one-way journey into the desert with only a water skin and a loaf of stale bread. Mainstream history tells us that banishment was a common penalty in the New Kingdom around 1500 BCE, especially for crimes against the state or temples. Unlike execution, it was a slow erasure, leaving the guilty to the desert's mercy, or lack thereof. You look at the traitor, his eyes darting to the endless dunes, and feel the weight of his dread. This isn't just a walk. It's a death sentence drawn out under a merciless sun. A guard steps forward, his kilt dusty, reading the sentence from a clay tablet. The traitor's to be stripped of his name, his goods confiscated, and his family barred from mourning him. You blink, the words sinking in. No mourning. That's not just cruel, it's spiritual sabotage, cutting him off from the afterlife's rituals. The crowd's silent, their faces hard as the guard hands the traitor his meager supplies. You imagine him stumbling through the sands, the heat blurring his vision, jackals, trailing his scent. Talk about a bad career pivot. Smuggle a few amulets, end up as desert dust. You're glad you're just visiting, not haggling with Hittite traders in this era? Here's the quirky tidbit that makes this even creepier. Some exiles, according to fringe tales whispered in caravan stops, were given cursed markers. Small stones inscribed with glyphs meant to draw malevolent spirits. These stones supposedly ensured the banished never found peace, their souls hounded by desert demons. You glance at the traitor now clutching his water skin, and wonder if a cursed stone's tucked in his bundle. Historians still debate whether these markers were real or just stories to deter smugglers, since archaeological finds of such objects are rare and ambiguous. But in a culture where the afterlife was everything you bet, those tales made exiles check their packs twice. You're starting to see why banishment was so feared. It wasn't just loneliness. It was a spiritual void, a life unmoored from Ma'at's embrace. You shift the gravel, biting into your sandals, and notice a woman in the crowd, her shawl clutched tight, muttering about the wandering dead. Her words send a chill through you, despite the warm night. The trader's untied now, his bonds cut, and the guard points to the desert, a silent command. The man takes a shaky step, then another, his silhouette shrinking against the dunes. You think back to the courtier's muted tongue, how it was a precise personal wound. This is vaster, emptier, like the desert itself, is the judge, jury, and executioner. You spot a young boy nearby tossing a pebble into the sand, asking his mother if the traitor will become a ghost. You smirk, but it's uneasy. Kids always dig into the spooky stuff, don't they? You're wondering the same thing, though. Will his soul find rest? Or is he doomed to drift forever? The crowd's thinning, some retreating to the village, others watching the traitors, fading form like it's a grim play. You step closer to the obelisk, its eroded glyphs barely legible, and catch a faint howl wind maybe or something. Wilder, the desert's no joke. It's a beast of heat and mirages where bones bleach white and stories end in silence. You imagine the traitor's journey, his water gone in days, his bread crumbled to dust the stars, his only guide. You think of the tomb robber's stake, how its pain was sharp public. This is slower, quieter, but no less brutal. It's a punishment that lets the world itself do the killing. You glance at a nearby vendor selling clay lamps muttering about desert ghosts. You chuckle, picturing a modern equivalent caught smuggling. Enjoy your one-star Airbnb in the Sahara. You linger the obelisk's shadow stretching long, and notice a priest in the distance, his linen robe stark against the dunes burning incense. His chants are faint, carried by the wind, and you wonder if he's praying for Mayat's balance or warding off the trader's restless spirit. The air feels heavier now, like it's holding its breath, and you're struck by the desert's vastness, its indifference. You think back to the laborers' dung parade, how it was humiliating but survivable. This trader, he's facing a void that swallows names, lives, everything. You picture his family forbidden to mourn their grief, a silent wound. Was it worth it, those smuggled amulets? No way. The path back to the village beckons, but you pause, taking in the scene. The trader's gone a speck against the dunes and the crowd's nearly vanished. You think of the priest's shattered tablet, how its curse was cosmic, eternal. This feels raw, like the earth itself is claiming the guilty. You spot a lone vulture circling above its wings, slicing the sky, and shiver. Egypt's justice wasn't just about crime. It was about exile, eternity, the fragile thread tying you to the gods. You're sinking deeper into its haunting layers, and there's no escape now. Let's hope you don't stray too far from the Nile as we go on. You're sinking deeper into the enigmatic heart of ancient Egypt. Now, the trader's vanishing silhouette in the desert's vast embrace, still haunting your thoughts like a whisper on the wind. The night's grown hush, the air warm and dense with the scent of scorched sand, trampled reeds, and a faint, unsettling trace of something sharp. Perhaps the lingering echo of sacred oils burned in a distant shrine. The stars above blaze like shards of polished obsidian, as if the gods themselves are peering down their silent judgment, weaving through the shadows. The trader's lonely exile, the queen's cryptic verdict, the laborers' reeking shame they're piling up in your mind, each punishment a peculiar, chilling brushstroke on Egypt's eerie canvas of justice. You're no longer just a curious passerby. You're entwined in the pulse of this ancient world where every misstep is a crack in Mayat's cosmic harmony. Now you're stepping into a realm so surreal, it feels like a dream spun from starlight, and myth trials where animals, not humans, pass judgment. Their divine roles turning justice into something utterly otherworldly. The path curves toward a squat temple, its walls etched with ibis and baboon, and you hear a strange chattering hum, alive, animalistic, unsettling. Your sandals scuff the dust, and a prickle of unease warns you this is about to get profoundly bizarre. You arrive at the temple's outer court, a sprawl of weathered sandstone slabs and flickering braziers, where a small crowd gathers, their faces a blend of reverence and nervous anticipation. A priest stands at the center, his linen robe stark white, clutching a staff crowned with a bronze baboon's head. Nearby, a caged baboon crouches, its eyes glinting like wet river stones. Its chatter sharp and almost deliberate, as if it's weighing the souls before it. In Egypt, animals weren't mere creatures. They were sacred conduits for gods like Thoth, whose ibis and baboon forms embodied wisdom and divine scrutiny. Mainstream history confirms that by the Middle Kingdom around 2000 BCE, temples like those in Hermopolis kept animals as holy avatars revered as Thoth's living voice. But here's the truly wild part. Certain crimes, petty thefts, broken oaths, sworn in Thoth's name were judged by these creatures. Their actions interpreted as the god's verdict. You spot a man kneeling before the cage, his hands clasped, accused of pilfering a temple's copper stylus. You blink, trying to wrap your head around it. A baboon's calling the shots. This is justice on a whole new level of strange. The priest raises his staff, his voice a low rhythmic chant that sends a shiver down your spine, and the crowd falls silent, their breaths held like offerings. He unlocks the cage and the baboon lopes out its movements, deliberate, sniffing the air with an eerie focus. The man's presented with two baskets, one filled with sweet dates, the other with smooth pebbles. If the baboon chooses the dates, he's innocent. If it picks the pebbles, he's guilty, facing a fine and a week of public shaming. You bite back a laugh trial by primate, really. But the man's trembling, his eyes locked on the baboon's clawed hands, his fear as palpable as the heat rising from the braziers. The animal circles its chatter, growing sharper, then lunges for the pebble basket, scattering stones across the slab, with a clatter that echoes like a gavel. The crowd gasps a collective intake of breath, and the priest proclaims the man's guilt. He's to repay triple the stylus's value and wear a woven reed cape for 7 days, marking his shame. You wince picturing him shuffling through the village looking like a human haystack. Talk about a rough day at the temple. You're glad you're just a spectator, not swearing oaths near Thoth's furry magistrate. Here's the quirky tidbit that makes this even odder: some temples. According to fringe whispers, traded in scribal quarters used oracle animals, subtly trained to favor certain offerings, rigging trials to serve hidden agendas. A cunning priest might coax a baboon toward pebbles to settle a personal score, all while claiming divine will. You glance at the baboon now, gnawing a stray date with a smug air, and wonder if it's in on the game. Historians still debate whether these animal trials were genuine expressions of faith, or cleverly staged as surviving records are vague, often mentioning only Thoth's decree without details. But in a culture where God spoke through rivers, stars, and beasts, you bet these trials felt as real as stone, and the man's ashen face proves it. You're starting to grasp why animal trials were so unsettling. They blurred the boundary between mortal and divine, turning justice into a cosmic gamble with fur and claws. You shift the sandstone's cool grit pressing against your sandals, and notice a woman in the crowd, her shawl clutched tight, muttering about Thoth's gaze. She's not wrong. The baboon's eyes have an unnerving, almost human glint, like they're peeling back your secrets. The man's led away the reed cape already draped over his shoulders, and you catch a whiff of his fear, sharp like sour linen left too long in the sun. This isn't just punishment, it's a ritual. A public affirmation that even animals enforce Mayat's order. You think back to the trader's desert exile, how it was vast, isolating. This is smaller, more communal, but no less humiliating. It's a verdict from the gods delivered by a chattering beast. You spot a young boy nearby tossing a pebble at the cage's bars, asking his mother if the baboon ever makes mistakes. You smirk, though it's tinged with unease. Kids always zero in on the spooky questions, don't they? You're wondering the same thing, though. Did Thoth truly speak? Or was it just a peckish baboon, grabbing what looked good? The crowd's murmuring now, some drifting into the night's embrace, others lingering like they're hoping for another trial. You edge closer to a brazier, its flames casting shadows that writhe like restless spirits across the slabs. The priest's chants soften, blending with the temple's ambient hum, and you notice the baboon's retreated to its cage, curling up with an air of bored satisfaction. You think of the queen's muted courtier, how her justice was cold, surgical. This is wilder, almost playful, but no less cutting. It's a punishment that turns you into a village anecdote, a cautionary tale for every temple scribe. You glance at a nearby wall, its carved ibis glowing faintly, its beak as sharp as a scribe's reed. and feel a shiver despite the warm night. Egypt's justice wasn't just about crime. It was about divinity nature, the delicate thread tying the world to the god's will. You're plunging deeper into its haunting strangeness, and there's no way out now. You wander toward a quieter corner of the court where a vendor hawks tiny clay baboon figurines, muttering about Thoth's wisdom. You chuckle imagining the man in his reed cape dodging Snickers at the market. Was it worth it, that stolen stylus? No way. You think back to the laborers' dung-smeared march, how it was raw public. This is quirkier, almost absurd, but just as stinging. It's a punishment that makes you a story, not a person. You pause by a carved lotus column, its petals catching the torchlight, and take in the temple's brooding power. The air pulses with secrets, every shadow whispering a tale. You glance at the stars, their light a map of the god's intent, and feel a prickle of awe. Let's hope you don't draw a baboon's attention as we venture further into this wild, eerie world. You're delving deeper into the shadowed veins of ancient Egypt. Now the baboon's chattering judgment still ringing in your ears like a strange primal song. The night's grown thicker, the air warm and heavy with the scent of scorched stone, damp papyrus, and a faint unsettling whiff of something bitter natron perhaps. Or the residue of sacred rites. The stars above burn like cold embers as if the gods are leaning closer, their gaze stitching through the dark. The baboon's pebble verdict, the traitor's desert exile, the queen's muted courtier? They're piling up in your mind, each punishment a vivid, eerie shard in Egypt's mosaic of justice. You're no longer just a curious wanderer. You're entangled in this ancient world where every crime is a splinter in Mayat's cosmic balance. Now you're stepping into a realm darker still, the grim duties of embalmers who didn't just prepare the dead but sometimes punish them, weaving justice into the very act of mummification. The path leads to a low mud brick workshop, its doorway draped in linen, and you hear a soft scraping tools on stone or something more macabre. Your sandals scuff the earth, and a chill warns you this is about to get profoundly creepy. You reach the workshop's entrance, its linen curtains swaying in the breeze, revealing glimpses of flickering oil lamps within. A small crowd lingers outside their whispers. Hush their faces tense with a mix of awe and dread. Inside, an embalmer works his hand steady his linen apron, stained with natron and resin. He's hunched over a body on a stone slab, its form shrouded in shadows. Embalmers were revered in Egypt, their craft a sacred art that bridged life and death. Mainstream history tells us that, by the New Kingdom around 1500 BCE, mummification was a refined process reserved for elites and sometimes commoners, ensuring the soul's journey to the afterlife. But here's the chilling twist: embalmers could also punish the dead, altering rituals to curse those deemed unworthy, their hands wielding justice beyond the grave. You spot a clay tablet near the slab inscribed with a name, and catch a priest's low chant something about denying the ka. You swallow hard. This isn't just preservation, it's judgment. A guard steps into the workshop, his kilt dusty, delivering a message from a temple court. The body on the slab belongs to a disgraced official convicted posthumously of bribing priests to falsify offerings. His punishment: the embalmers are to omit key rites, skipping the heart scarab, leaving the mouth unopened, ensuring his soul wanders lost barred from Osiris's realm. You blink, the weight of it sinking in. No heart scarab. That's like ripping up someone's afterlife passport. The embalmer nods, his knife glinting as he slices through linen, deliberately bypassing the rituals that would guide the official's soul. You imagine the man's Kai confused, trapped in a liminal void, and can't help but think, Bribe a priest, lose eternity. Talk about a posthumous plot twist. You're glad you're just peeking in, not lying on that slab. Here's the quirky tidbit that makes this even spookier. Some embalmers, according to fringe tales whispered in necropolis alleys, used shadow bindings on cursed corpses. They'd sew secret glyphs into the wrappings, supposedly tethering the soul to the mummy, preventing its journey to the afterlife. You glance at the embalmer, his hands threading linen with eerie precision, and wonder if he's slipping in one of those glyphs now. Historians still debate whether these shadow bindings were real or just myths to scare tomb workers, since surviving mummies show no clear evidence of tampered wrappings. But in a culture obsessed with eternity, you bet those stories made the guilty sweat even in death. You're starting to see why embalmers were both revered and feared. Their hands didn't just preserve. They could condemn shaping a soul's fate with a flick of a knife. You shift the workshop's doorway cool against your shoulder and notice a woman in the crowd, her shawl clutched tight, muttering about the unmoored dead. Her words send a shiver through you despite the warm night. The embalmer's still working his tools, scraping softly, and you catch a whiff of resin, sharp like pine and sorrow. This isn't just punishment, it's a ritual, a final verdict etched into the body itself. You think back to the baboon's trial, how it was surreal, almost whimsical. This is heavier, more intimate, like the gods are reaching through the embalmer's hands to settle a score. You spot a young boy nearby tossing a pebble at the ground, asking his mother if the official's ghost will haunt the tomb. You smirk, but it's uneasy. Kids always dig into the creepy stuff, don't they? You're wondering the same thing, though. Will his soul linger, or is it already lost? The crowd's murmurs grow softer, some slipping into the night, others lingering like they're waiting for a sign. You step closer, peering through the curtain, and see the embalmer wrapping the body. His movements deliberate, almost reverent, yet ominously selective. The tablet with the official's name lies discarded, its edges chipped as if its purpose is done. You think of the trader's desert exile, how it was vast, desolate. This is quieter, more surgical, but no less devastating. It's a punishment that rewrites eternity itself. You glance at a nearby wall carved with Anubis's jackal face, its eyes seeming to follow you and feel a prickle of awe. Egypt's justice wasn't just about crime. It was about the soul, the afterlife, the delicate thread tying the mortal to the divine. You're plunging deeper into its haunting depths, and there's no turning back. You wander toward a corner of the workshop's outer yard where a vendor sells small natron packets, muttering about Anubis's scales. You chuckle, picturing the official's soul stranded without its scarab, facing Osiris's judgment alone. Was it worth it, those bribes? No chance. You think back to the laborer's dung parade, how it was earthy survivable. This is eternal, a verdict carved into the body's very wrappings. You pause by a carved lotus, its petals catching the lamplight, and take in the workshop's somber power. The air hums with secrets, every shadow whispering a tale. Let's hope you don't end up on an embalmer's slab as we venture further into this dark, eerie world. You're sinking ever deeper into the shadowed underbelly of ancient Egypt, the embalmer's grim ritual still clinging to your thoughts like the scent of natron on the air. The night's grown denser, the air warm and thick with the aroma of sun-scorched dust, overripe dates, and a faint, unsettling tang of something sour, spoiled grain, perhaps, or the residue of market dealings gone wrong. The stars above blaze like shards of cold fire, as if the gods are pressing closer, their silent scrutiny threading through the darkness. The embalmer's omitted rites, the baboon's pebble verdict, the trader's desert exile, they're stacking in your mind. each punishment a strange, haunting fragment in Egypt's eerie tapestry of justice. You're no longer just a curious drifter. You're woven into the pulse of this ancient world where every crime is a fracture in Mayat's cosmic order. Now you're stepping into the bustling chaos of the marketplace where cheating traders faced penalties so peculiar they turned justice into a public spectacle. The path opens into a crowded square alive with torchlight and the hum of bartering, but there's a sharp edge here, like the crowd's waiting for a reckoning. You hear a rhythmic shout, angry, insistent, and your curiosity pulls you forward. This is about to get oddly theatrical. You reach the square, its packed earth center, ringed by stalls heaped with barley linen and clay pots, their scents mingling with the sweat of haggling traders. A wooden platform stands at the heart rough but commanding, surrounded by a throng that's equal parts curious and indignant. A woman stands on the platform, her hands bound, her kilt stained with flour. She's a grain merchant caught mixing chaff into her barley to cheat buyers, a serious offense in a society where bread was life and trust was sacred. Mainstream history tells us that by the New Kingdom around 1500 BCE, Egypt's markets were tightly regulated with overseers and scribes monitoring weights and measures to uphold Ma'at's truth. Cheating wasn't just theft. It was a betrayal of the community, a jab at the gods who bless the harvest. You squint, noticing the woman's defiant glare, though her hands tremble. She's about to learn that Egypt's justice doesn't mess around with market scams. An overseer steps forward, a lean man with a reed stylus tucked behind his ear, holding a clay tablet etched with her crime. The punishment, she's to be marked by the grain, her face smeared with wet barley paste and a sack of her tainted stock, tied to her back for a day-long march through the market. You blink, stifling a chuckle, barley paste. This like getting a face full of oatmeal for fudging your taxes. But the crowd's murmurs turn sharp, and the woman's defiance cracks her eyes, darting to the jeering faces. Public shaming was Egypt's favorite tool for market crimes designed to sting pride and restore trust. You imagine her trudging through the stalls, the sack-chafing kids tossing pebbles at her heels. Talk about a sticky situation. You're glad you're just watching, not hawking grain in this unforgiving square. Here's the quirky tidbit that makes this even weirder. Some market punishments, according to fringe tales swapped among traders, involved mock offerings. A cheating merchant might be forced to carry a basket of their faulty goods to a temple and offer it to the gods only to have it publicly burned as unfit. You glance at the woman now being slathered with paste by a grinning guard and wonder if she'll face that ritual next. Historians still debate whether these mock offerings were common or just local flair, since market records focus more on fines than theatrics. But in a culture where gods like Osiris bless the crops, you bet those burned baskets hit hard, turning a merchant scam into a divine insult. You're starting to see why market penalties were so effective. They didn't just punish. They made you a cautionary tale, a walking lesson in Ma'at's truth. You shift the crowd's heat pressing against you and notice a man nearby, his basket of figs balanced on his shoulder, muttering about the grain witch. You smirk. Gossip spreads faster than chaff in this market. The overseer's voice cuts through, ordering the woman to begin her march, and the crowd parts, some shouting, others shaking their heads. You catch a whiff of the barley paste, wet earthy like a bad baking experiment, and wrinkle your nose. This isn't just justice. It's performance art, a public cleansing of the market's honor. You think back to the embalmer's omitted rites, how they were cosmic eternal. This is louder, messier, but knock. You step closer to the platform, the torchlight casting flickering shadows, and see the guard tying the sack to the woman's back, its weight making her stagger. The crowd's energy is electric, a mix of scorn and fascination. And you realize this punishment isn't just about her, it's about the market itself. The trust that binds it. You spot a young girl nearby tossing a pebble at the platform, asking her mother if the woman's face will stay sticky forever. You chuckle, but it's uneasy. Kids always zero in on the awkward stuff, don't they? You're wondering the same thing, though. Will she ever live this down? The woman starts her march, her steps slow, the sack dragging behind her. You follow at a distance, weaving through stalls where vendors hawk bread and copper, rings their eyes flicking to her with a mix of pity and disdain. You think of the baboon's trial, how it was surreal, almost whimsical. This is raw, more human, but no less humiliating. It's a punishment that stains your name, your trade, your place in the square. You pause by a stall selling clay amulets, the vendor muttering about chaff cheats. You grin, imagining a modern equivalent caught scamming where a billboard of your bad Yelp reviews. Egypt's market justice knew how to make a point, and this woman's learning it the hard way. As she loops through the square, the crowd's jeers soften, some drifting back to their stalls, others watching in silence. You notice a priest in the distance, his linen robe glowing faintly, burning incense as if to purify the market's air. His chants are low, blending with the hum of bartering, and you wonder if he's praying for Ma'at's balance or warding off the taint of her crime. The woman's face is a mask of barley paste, her eyes downcast, and you almost feel a pang of sympathy. Almost. She did cheat honest buyers, after all, padding her profits with worthless chaff. You picture her tomorrow scrubbing her skin raw, dodging smirks at every stall. Will she return to the market, or is this the end of her grain trading days? You linger the square's chaos fading as the march continues and take in the scene. The platform's empty now, but its shadow looms a reminder of the market's unforgiving code. You think back to the trader's desert exile, how it was vast, isolating. This is public sticky, but no less brutal. It's a punishment that lives in whispers in the market's memory. You glance at the stars, their light sharp as a scribe's reed, and feel the god's presence, Ma'at demanding truth, Horus watching from above. Egypt's justice wasn't just about crime. It was about community trust, the fragile bonds holding this world together. You're diving deeper into its eerie layers, and there's no turning back now. You step away, the square's glow dimming as you head toward a quieter path, the woman's march still visible in the distance. Her sack trails dust a grim comet's tail, and you think of the courtier's scarred tongue, how it was precise, personal. This is broader, a spectacle for all to see, but just as piercing, it's a wound to her place in the market's heart. You pause by a carved falcon, its beak glinting in the torchlight, and take in the square's fading pulse. The air hums with secrets, every stall hiding a story. Let's hope you don't haggle too hard as we venture further into this strange, haunting world. You're plunging deeper into the shadowed depths of ancient Egypt. Now the grain merchant's sticky march through the market still vivid in your mind, her barley-smeared face a haunting emblem of public shame. The night's grown heavier, the air warm and dense with the scent of sun-baked clay over ripe melons and a faint, eerie whiff of something smoky, charred papyrus perhaps, or the residue of sacred fires. The stars above burn like chips of polished flint, as if the gods are drawing closer, their silent gaze stitching through the darkness. The merchant's chaff-filled sack, the embalmer's omitted rites, the baboon's pebble verdict. They're stacking up each punishment, a strange, chilling fragment in Egypt's vast mosaic of justice. You're no longer just a curious wanderer. You're entwined in the pulse of this ancient world, where every crime is a tear in Mayat's cosmic fabric. Now you're slipping into a hidden, almost forbidden realm, the secret tribunals of the temple where priests conducted clandestine rites to punish those who defied the gods. The path narrows, leading to a towering temple complex, its walls etched with falcons and cobras, and you hear a low, rhythmic chant, ominous, otherworldly. Your sandals scuff the dust, and a prickle of unease warns you this is about to get deeply unsettling. You reach the temple's outer gate, a massive limestone slab, flanked by braziers, their flames casting writhing shadows on the carvings. A small crowd lingers at a distance, their whispers barely audible, their faces tense with a mix of fear and reverence. Beyond the gate, a secluded courtyard opens, hidden from public view, where a robed priest stands before a stone altar, his leopard skin cloak swaying as he raises a bronze ankh. This is no ordinary temple service. It's a secret tribunal, a place where the god's wrath is channeled through priests to judge crimes too sacred or too dangerous for open courts. Mainstream history tells us that by the New Kingdom around 1500 BCE, major temples like Amun's at Karnak held immense power, their priests acting as both spiritual and judicial authorities. They could try cases of blasphemy, temple theft, or ritual violations in private, their verdicts shrouded in mystery. You spot a man kneeling before the altar, his hands bound, his linen tunic torn. He's a temple worker accused of stealing a sacred amulet from Anubis's shrine, a crime that's not just theft, but a direct affront to the god of the dead. The priest steps forward, his voice a low, resonant hum, reciting the man's crime to a handful of robed initiates. The punishment? He's to be bound to the shadow, his name inscribed on a papyrus scroll, burned in a ritual fire, and his body marked with a hidden glyph to bar his soul from the afterlife. You blink, the words sinking in like a stone. Burned, name hidden glyph. This isn't just justice, it's a cosmic eviction, erasing him from eternity's guest list. The initiate's part revealing a brazier where flames leap and the priest casts the scroll into the fire, its edges curling black. The crowd outside the gate gasps, though they can't see the act, and you feel a chill despite the warm night air. You can't help but think, steal an amulet, lose your soul. Talk about a high-stakes heist gone wrong. You're glad you're just sneaking a peek, not polishing Anubis's relics in this temple. Here's the quirky tidbit that makes this even creepier. Some secret tribunals, according to fringe tales whispered in temple cloisters, used ghost marks, glyphs painted on the skin with invisible resin, only visible under sacred oils meant to summon restless spirits to haunt the guilty. You glance at the man now being led to a side chamber and wonder if a ghost mark's being etched beneath his tunic. Historians still debate whether these marks were real or just priestly scare tactics, since no clear evidence survives in temple archives. But in a culture where the afterlife was as real as the Nile, you bet those stories made temple workers double-check their pockets. You're starting to see why these tribunals were so feared. Their justice was hidden, mystical, like a verdict whispered by the gods themselves. You shift the gate's cool stone, brushing your shoulder, and notice a woman in the crowd, her shawl clutched tight, muttering about Anubis' wrath. Her words send a shiver through you, despite the flickering brazier's warmth. The priest's chants grow louder, and you catch a glimpse of the man's face, pale eyes wide as he's led back, a faint bandage on his arm, where the glyph might be. This isn't just punishment. It's a ritual, a sacred cleansing of the temple's honor. You think back to the market woman's barley march, how it was loud, public. This is cloaked, intimate, like the gods are settling the score in private. You spot a young boy outside the gate tossing a pebble at the ground, asking his mother if the man's soul will get lost forever. You smirk, but it's uneasy. Kids always cut to the spooky core, don't they? You're wondering the same thing, though. Will his caw wander, or is it already bound? The crowd's murmurs soften, some slipping into the night, others lingering like they're waiting for a divine sign. You edge closer to the gate, peering into the courtyard where the priest scatters ash from the burned scroll, its flakes drifting like ghostly snow. The altar's glow casts long shadows, and you realize this tribunal wasn't just about the man. It was about the temple, the gods, the unseen balance of Mayat. You think of the embalmer's omitted rites, how they were eternal surgical. This is darker, more secretive, like a punishment, woven into the very fabric of the divine. You glance at a nearby carving, Anubis's jackal eyes glinting, and feel a prickle of awe. Egypt's justice wasn't just about crime. It was about sanctity, eternity, the fragile cord tying the mortal to the divine. You're diving deeper into its haunting strangeness, and there's no escape now. You wander toward a quieter corner where a vendor sells small obsidian amulets, muttering about temple shadows. You chuckle, picturing the man's marked arm, his soul tethered by an invisible glyph. Was it worth it, that stolen amulet? No way. You think back to the baboon's trial, how it was surreal, almost whimsical. This is heavier, more arcane, a verdict that lives in whispers and hidden chambers. You pause by a carved cobra, its hood flared in the torchlight, and take in the temple's brooding power. The air pulses with secrets, every shadow hiding a story. Let's hope you don't stray too close to Anubis's shrine as we venture further into this eerie world. You're burrowing deeper into the shadowed marrow of ancient Egypt now, the temple tribunal's smoldering scroll and ghostly glyphs still searing your thoughts like a half-remembered nightmare. The night's grown denser, the air warm and thick with the scent of parched earth-wilted jasmine, and a faint unsettling whiff of something acrid, burned myrrh perhaps, or the echo of sacred fires snuffed out. The stars above blaze like shards of polished bone, as if the gods are inching closer, their silent scrutiny threading through every shadow. The temple worker's cursed mark, the grain merchant's sticky shame, the embalmer's omitted rites. They're piling up each punishment, a strange, haunting shard in Egypt's eerie mosaic of justice. You're no longer just a curious drifter. You're entwined in the pulse of this ancient world where every crime is a fracture in Mayat's cosmic weave. Now you're stepping into a realm that stretches beyond the mortal veil punishments that linger into the afterlife, where justice doesn't end with death, but follows the soul into eternity's unyielding grasp. The path leads to a necropolis, its tombs looming like silent sentinels, and you hear a faint, eerie hum wind through stone or something more spectral. Your sandals crunch on gravel and a chill warns you. This is about to get profoundly otherworldly. You reach the necropolis's edge where limestone cliffs cradle a maze of tombs, their entrances sealed with carved spells. A small group gathers near a freshly sealed shaft, their torchlight casting jittery shadows on the rock. A priest stands before a stela, his linen robe glowing faintly, clutching a papyrus scroll inscribed with funerary texts. This isn't a burial rite, it's a final judgment, a punishment woven into the soul's journey beyond the grave. Mainstream history tells us that by the New Kingdom around 1500 BCE, Egyptians believed the afterlife was a trial where the heart was weighed against Mayat's feather in Osiris Hall. But for those who defied the gods in life, priests could alter this journey, cursing the soul to ensure it never reached paradise. You spot a clay effigy near the stela. Its face crudely shaped its name, scratched out a stand-in for a noblewoman condemned posthumously for poisoning a rival priestess. You swallow the air tasting of dust and dread. Her punishment wasn't served in life. It's being etched into her afterlife. The priest raises the scroll, his voice a low, resonant chant that seems to vibrate the cliffs, reciting her crimes against the temple and Mayat. The penalty, her soul's to be denied, the Duat's light. Her name unspoken in funerary rites, her effigy buried in a cursed heap of ash and salt to bind her Ka to the underworld's chaos. You blink the weight of it sinking like a stone. Unspoken. That's not just a snub. It's spiritual obliteration, ensuring her soul wanders a dark, formless void barred from Osiris's fields. The priest crumbles the effigy, its clay shards falling into a brazier where flames leap the ash, mixing with salt in a ritual that feels ancient final. The group gasps, their faces pale, and you feel a shiver despite the warm desert air. You can't help but think, poison a rival, lose eternity. Talk about a grudge that outlives the grave. You're glad you're just a visitor, not stirring drama in the temple's backrooms. Here's the quirky tidbit that makes this even eerier. Some afterlife curses, according to fringe tales, whispered in tomb workers' huts, involved mirror traps, reflective shards buried with the cursed, said to confuse the soul, trapping it in endless reflections of its own guilt. You picture the noblewoman's Ka lost in a maze of mirrored shame and wonder, if a shard glints in that ash heap. Historians still debate whether mirror traps were real or just poetic threats, since funerary artifacts rarely show clear signs of sabotage. But in a culture where the afterlife was as vital as breath, you bet those tales made the guilty tremble even in death. You're starting to grasp why Egypt's justice felt so eternal it didn't just punish the body. It hunted the soul, reshaping its journey with ash chants and hidden spells. You shift the gravel, biting your sandals, and notice a man in the group, his kilt patched, muttering about the unlit paths. His words chill you, evoking a void where souls drift without stars. The priest scatters the ash-salt mix, his movements deliberate, and you catch a whiff of myrrh, sharp, mournful like grief itself. This isn't just punishment. It's a cosmic verdict, a way to ensure Mayat's balance endures beyond the grave. You think back to the temple's hidden shrine, how it was secretive, cloaked. This is vaster, more eternal, like the god's final word on a life gone wrong. You spot a young girl nearby, clutching her mother's shawl, asking if the noblewoman's ghost will scream in the dark. You smirk, but it's uneasy. Kids always dig into the spooky stuff, don't they? You're wondering the same thing, though. Will her soul wander, or is it already bound to oblivion? The group's murmurs fade, some retreating to the village, others lingering like they're waiting for the cliffs to speak. You step closer, drawn to the stela's carvings. Anubis, Osiris, their scales gleaming in the torchlight. The priest's chants soften, blending with the wind's low moan. And you realize this ritual wasn't just about her, it was about the gods, the afterlife, the eternal order of Mayat. You think of the grain merchant's march, how it was public, messy. This is silent, spectral, a wound to the soul, not flesh. You glance at a nearby tomb, its seal unbroken, as if guarding secrets older than the stars. Egypt's justice wasn't just about crime. It was about eternity, divinity, the fragile thread tying life to what lies beyond. You're plunging deeper into its haunting strangeness, and there's no way out. You wander toward a rocky outcrop where a vendor sells small obsidian scarabs, muttering about Osiris Gate. You chuckle, picturing the noblewoman's lost Ka trapped in a void of ash and salt. Was it worth it, that poisoned cup? No chance. You think back to the baboon's trial, how it was quirky, almost absurd. This is heavier, more arcane, a punishment that lives in the edge of forever. You pause by a carved jackal, its eyes glinting in the torchlight, and take in the necropolis's brooding silence. The air hums with secrets, every tomb a story. Let's hope you don't anger a priestess as we venture further into this dark, eerie world. You're drifting through the shadowed soul of ancient Egypt, now the noblewoman's cursed effigy crumbling in your mind like ash scattered on a starless wind. The nights groan, still the air warm and heavy with the scent of dry limestone, faded myrrh, and a faint eerie trace of something cold. Grave dust, perhaps, or the echo of eternal judgments. The stars above gleam like shards of polished bone, as if the gods have drawn their final curtain, their gaze lingering on the world below. The noblewoman's unlit afterlife, the temple worker's hidden glyph, the grain merchant's sticky shame, they're woven tight in your thoughts, each punishment, a haunting thread in Egypt's vast tapestry of justice. You're no longer just a wanderer. You're bound to the pulse of this ancient land where every crime is a wound in Mahat's cosmic weave. Now you're standing at the edge of it all, reflecting on the eerie echoes of Egypt's laws as the night fades their strangeness, settling into your bones like a whispered lullaby. The path leads to a quiet hill overlooking the Nile, its waters glinting under moonlight. And you hear a soft hum wind or the god's final sigh. Your sandals sink into the sand, and you're ready to let this journey close. You settle on the hill, the Nile's gentle ripples stretching before you, a silver thread tying the living to the dead. No crowds here, no braziers or chants, just you, the river, and the weight of Egypt's justice, its punishments lingering like shadows on the water. This is where it all converges, the merchant's fishy parade, the noble's desert doom, the baboon's pebble verdict, the embalmer's omitted rites. Each was a piece of Maat, a desperate bid to keep chaos at bay. Mainstream history tells us that by the late period around 600 BCE, Egypt's legal system had evolved to blend in divine decrees with practical governance, yet its core remained unchanged. Crimes weren't just personal. They were cosmic, threatening the gods' order. You gaze at the river, its surface a mirror for the stars, and feel the weight of that truth. Every punishment from dung to curses was a stitch in the fabric of eternity. You lean back the sand, cool beneath you, and picture a man standing here centuries ago, maybe a scribe or a priest, pondering the same laws. He'd know the stakes break Ma'at and the universe wobbles. You think of the temple worker's burned name, how it was a secret act hidden in sacred chambers. Here's the quirky tidbit that ties it all together. Some priests, according to fringe tales whispered in Nile-side taverns, believed punishments echoed in the Duat, where souls faced trials not just from Osiris but from their own deeds replayed like a cosmic loop. You imagine the noblewoman's Ka trapped in a mirrored void, or the grain merchant forever marching with chaff. Historians still argue whether these afterlife echoes were literal beliefs or poetic warnings, since funerary texts focus more on rewards than punishments. But in a culture obsessed with eternity, you bet those stories shaped how justice was served, making every penalty a shadow cast beyond the grave. The Nile's ripples catch your eye, their rhythm soothing, and you reflect on the strangeness of it all. The merchant's fish basket was absurd, yet it stung his pride. The crocodile pit was primal, a nod to Sobek's jaws. The queen's scarred courtier was precise, a cut to his voice. Each punishment was a story, a lesson, a plea to the gods keep us whole. You smirk, imagining a modern equivalent tweeting a bad take and getting cancelled for eternity. Egypt's justice had a flair for the dramatic, but it worked, didn't it? Villages thrived, temples stood, the Nile flowed. You think of the laborers' dung parade, how it was messy but communal, a way to laugh and scold at once. Even the baboon's trial with its chattering verdict was a nod to Thoth's wisdom, a reminder that God spoke through the world itself. You shift the sand sifting beneath you and notice a lone heron by the river, its silhouette sharp against the water. It feels like a sign, maybe Horus watching, or just Egypt's quiet beauty asserting itself. You think back to the necropolis, how its tombs held secrets older than the stars. Every punishment you've seen was a thread in that legacy, tying the living to the divine. You chuckle picturing the tomb robber's stake, talk about a bad career move. Yet even that brutality had purpose, guarding the dead-pleasing Anubis. You're starting to see why Egypt's justice felt so alive, so eternal. It wasn't just about crime. It was about balance, faith, the fragile dance between chaos and order. The night's fading, the stars softening as dawn's first blush creeps over the horizon. You think of the trader's desert exile, how it was vast, lonely. Here by the Nile, it's different, calm, reflective, like Egypt itself is exhaling. You imagine the scribe's pen, the priest's chant, the queen's gaze all converging in this moment. They're gone, but their echoes linger in the river's flow. The sands whisper, the gods' silent watch. You smirk, wondering if a kid somewhere asked, "Do the punished ever rest?" You're not sure, but you hope so. Egypt's justice was harsh, but it was fair, wasn't it? A world without Mahat would have crumbled, and you're glad it didn't. You lean forward, the Nile's hum lulling you, and let the punishments fade, their edges blurring like a dream. The fish, the dunes, the baboon, the ash, their stories now soft as the sand beneath you. You think of the heron, its wings catching the dawn, and feel a quiet peace. Egypt's laws were strange, but they held the world together, guiding souls to the stars. You're ready to rest, to let the river carry you into sleep. Its ripples a gentle promise Mayat endures. The air grows softer now, the Nile's whispers fading into a gentle rhythmic hum, like a lullaby sung by the stars themselves. You feel the sand's cool embrace each grain, a tiny anchor grounding you as the night dissolves. The punishments, those wild, eerie tales of fish baskets, desert voids, and cursed scrolls drift away their edges, softening, blending into the river's endless flow. You're safe here on this quiet hill, the god's gaze no longer sharp, but warm like a parent watches a sleeping child. The heron by the water lifts its wings, a silent farewell, and you imagine it soaring into the duat, carrying your thoughts to the stars. Let the weight of Egypt's justice slip, let Mayat's balance hold you steady and sure. The dawn's coming, but for now there's only peace, only the river's song, only the gentle pull of sleep. Close your eyes, breathe deep, and let the night take you soft as a lotus petal falling to the Nile.